What happens when a billionaire's heartbreak meets a gynecologist's unstoppable compassion? This is not just a love story, it's a journey through pain, sacrifice, and a legacy that spans generations. But wait until you discover the twist that turned one woman's sorrow into a global mission of healing. Trust me, you won't believe how it ends. Stay with me. This might just be the most beautiful love story you hear today. Before we dive into this unforgettable story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and tap the bell icon so you never miss out on stories that can truly change lives. These aren't just stories, they're powerful lessons wrapped in emotion, meaning, and inspiration. So like, share, and join us on this journey where every tale helps us grow, heal, and understand the world just a little better. Let's rise together, one story at a time. The most beautiful love story of a gynecologist and a billionaire you will see today. Do not skip. This is a true story. A story about love, pain, sacrifice, and healing. A story that proves no amount of money can replace the warmth of a sincere heart. It began on a rainy Tuesday morning in Seattle. The sky was thick with clouds, heavy and gray, like a blanket of sorrow. Inside St. Maria's Women's Hospital, the hallways buzzed with quiet urgency. The scent of antiseptic filled the air. It was sharp, sterile, and cold. Dr. Amina had been on her feet for 12 hours straight. She was tired, but her eyes held the light of someone who loved what she did. She was a gynecologist. A brilliant one. Smart, focused, compassionate. That morning, her assistant handed her a special file. "Emergency C-section," she said. "But the patient is not from our list." Amina opened the file. The name read, Sophie Lancaster. But what caught her attention was the man standing behind the trembling pregnant woman. He was tall, with salt and pepper hair, and eyes filled with fear. He was wearing a designer coat soaked from the rain. But he looked utterly helpless. That man was Damien Lancaster, the billionaire tech tycoon who had built half the city. And now, he was shaking. "Please," he said, his voice cracking. "Save my wife. Save our child." In that moment, Amina did not see a billionaire. She saw a husband. Terrified. Holding the hand of the woman he loved more than life. The surgery was intense. Sophie had complications. There was bleeding. There was tension. But Amina moved with precision. Every heartbeat mattered. Every second felt like a lifetime. In the waiting room, Damien paced. His shoes left wet trails on the tiled floor. His hands trembled as he clutched a small, pink blanket they had brought for the baby. After what felt like hours, Amina came out. She removed her mask, and for a moment, her face gave nothing away. Then, she smiled. "Your wife is safe. Your daughter is safe." Damien collapsed into the chair. Tears rolled down his face. He said nothing. Just cried. Grateful. In the days that followed, he stayed by Sophie's bedside. He held her hand as she recovered. He sang lullabies to the tiny baby girl who slept peacefully in her crib. He watched Amina move from room to room, helping every patient like they were her own family. One evening, he approached her. "I want to donate," he said. "But not just money. I want to build something lasting with you." At first, she refused. But Damien was persistent. He was not trying to buy her. He was trying to honor her. He had seen in her what he had not seen in decades, genuine, selfless care. They started a foundation. One that offered maternal care to underserved women. Amina handled the vision. Damien handled the funds. Together, they changed hundreds of lives. But something else changed too. Sophie noticed it first. The way Damien spoke about Amina. The way his eyes softened when she entered the room. The way he always asked about her day. It hurt. But Sophie was no ordinary woman. She loved her husband. But she saw the truth. They had grown apart. Their marriage had become quiet. Lonely. But not alive. One night, as rain poured against the hospital windows once again, Sophie asked Amina to sit with her. "I know my husband," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "He smiles again because of you." Amina was silent. Her heart raced. She did not want to be the reason for someone's heartbreak. But Sophie held her hand. You healed more than my body. You healed him. And that is a gift I could never repay. Damien and Sophie parted with grace. Not in anger. Not in bitterness. But in love. They remained friends. Co-parents. Partners in the foundation. A year later, Damien and Amina married in a small ceremony. There were no lavish decorations. Just close friends. Children laughing. And Sophie, holding little Clara's hand, smiling warmly. Their love was not born out of desire. It was born out of pain, healing, and purpose. They had both lost. They had both carried unbearable weight. But they found each other in the quiet spaces of compassion. They built a home filled with joy. Adopted 2 more children. Opened 3 new hospitals. And every Sunday, they hosted dinner for patients who had nowhere to go. This is not a fairy tale. It is a real story. Of strength. Of kindness. Of love found not in passion, but in presence. Not in perfection, but in patience. Not in the grand moments, but in the silent ones. The world often forgets stories like these. But they are the ones that remind us. The heart can heal. The soul can love again. And even in the darkest hour, someone out there is ready to share your pain. Years passed, and the foundation grew stronger. Damien and Amina traveled across the country, visiting rural towns. They listened to women who had been forgotten. They hugged mothers who had lost. They trained young doctors who carried the same spark Amina once had. Every evening, they returned to their quiet home on the hill overlooking the city. It was not grand, though they could afford a palace. It was warm. Books lined every wall. Children's laughter echoed through every room. Little Clara, now 7, would wait by the door every evening. She would run into Damien's arms and tug at Amina's white coat, begging to play doctor. She had already memorized half the human anatomy. Just like Mama, she would say proudly. Amina always smiled. But deep inside, her heart ached with the weight of every mother she could not save. Damien knew. He never asked her to stop. But he was there, quietly holding her at night, whispering the names of the women they had helped, reminding her that she had done more than enough. One winter evening, Amina received a letter. It was handwritten. From a girl named Lila in Arizona. Dear Dr. Amina, it read. My mother said you saved my life. When I was born, she said you fought like a superhero. I am 8 now. I want to be just like you. Love, Lila. Amina pressed the letter to her chest and cried. Not out of sorrow, but gratitude. That night, she sat on the porch beside Damien. Snow was falling gently, covering the trees in a soft white hush. Do you ever wonder, she asked, how we got here? Damien smiled. Every single day. She looked at him, eyes searching. You lost so much. Your marriage, your name in the tabloids, your peace. And I gained more, he replied. I found my purpose. I found you. Their hands met, fingers intertwined. Not in urgency, but in calm. Like 2 rivers that had traveled miles to finally meet. Suddenly, a phone rang inside the house. It was urgent. A 17-year-old girl had gone into labor in a nearby shelter. The on-call doctor was stuck in snow traffic. Without hesitation, Amina grabbed her coat. Damien reached for the keys. Let's go, he said. She paused. You don't have to come. He kissed her forehead. I always will. At the shelter, the scene was tense. The girl was scared. Alone. Shivering on a cot with worn blankets. Amina knelt beside her, took her hand, and whispered, You are not alone anymore. I am here. The delivery was hard. Complications arose. But just like that rainy Tuesday years ago, Amina did not waver. Damien stood behind her, holding the flashlight when the power flickered. He wiped the girl's forehead with a towel. He whispered prayers. When the baby finally cried, the girl burst into tears. Not from pain, but from overwhelming, unshakable relief. Amina placed the newborn in her arms. Meet your son, she said softly. Outside, snow continued to fall. But in that tiny room, there was only warmth. Later that night, on the drive back home, Amina stared out the window. She thought of all the stories, all the lives. She turned to Damien. "Do you think this, all of this, will matter someday?" He looked at her, eyes gleaming with quiet certainty. "It already does." The house was silent when they returned. Clara was asleep on the couch, curled beneath a blanket. Damien scooped her up and carried her to bed. Amina stood in the doorway, watching them, her heart swelling. Not with pride. Not with success. But with a love that had taken root in the darkest places and bloomed in the light. Their story was not perfect. It was messy, painful, beautiful, real. And they never stopped writing it. Every day. With every child they saved. Every hand they held. Every tear they shared. Years moved like quiet waves across the shore. Softly, yet relentlessly. And with time, Clara grew. At 15, she no longer tugged at Amina's coat. Instead, she studied late into the night. Biology books stacked beside her bed. A stethoscope hanging on the wall. Not a toy, but a dream. One evening, she came home with a letter clutched in her hand. Tears welled in her eyes, but she was smiling. Amina reached for it. It was an invitation. Clara had been accepted into the National Medical Scholars Program. Damien laughed with pride, lifting her off the ground as he had when she was small. "You are going to be better than both of us," he said, his voice trembling. Clara hugged them both, her voice soft. "I just want to help people the way you always have." But that year brought more than joy. Amina began feeling a dull ache in her chest. At first, she ignored it. She had patience, a schedule, 1,000 responsibilities. But pain does not wait. One morning, she collapsed outside the clinic gates. The world spun. Her breath came shallow. And the people she once saved were now the ones rushing to save her. Damien never left her side. Tests followed. Scans. Silence. Then, the diagnosis, early-stage heart failure. The doctor's voice was calm, but Damien felt the floor shift beneath him. Amina smiled, even in the face of it. She reached for Damien's hand. "We will get through this," she said. But he saw the fear hidden behind her calm. He had seen it before, in the mirror years ago, when Sophie lay in that hospital bed. The treatment was long, tiring, sometimes cruel. She lost weight. Her steps slowed. But never her spirit. Clara took charge. She attended school by day, sat at her mother's bedside by night. She read her medical journals aloud, hoping to keep her mother's mind sharp. And every evening, Damien would prepare soup from her mother's recipe book, pages stained with love and memory. One night, Clara broke down. She stood in the kitchen, hands shaking. "I am scared," she whispered. "I do not want to lose her." Damien wrapped his arms around her. "She is not going anywhere. Not if I have anything to do with it." And he meant it. He paused all business. Donated to research. Flew in specialists. He would have given the world if it meant seeing her smile without pain again. One doctor, a quiet man from Italy, brought a new idea. A procedure, risky but promising. Amina hesitated. But when she saw the way Clara's eyes lit with hope, she nodded. "I will try," she said. "For you." The morning of the surgery, the hospital hallway was filled with staff, nurses, patients, doctors, everyone whose lives Amina had touched. They stood in silent prayer as the gurney rolled past. Inside the operating room, the lights buzzed softly. Damien held her hand until the last moment. "I love you," he whispered. "I have always loved you." She smiled. "I know." The hours dragged. Clara sat curled in a chair, gripping the same pink blanket she once wrapped around her doll. Damien paced, again. Just like the first time. He hated hospitals. But this one, built with their own hands, held every chapter of their love. Then the doors opened. The surgeon stepped out. His eyes found Damien's. A slow, tired smile crossed his face. "She made it." Damien collapsed into a chair. Clara covered her face, tears pouring through her fingers. And inside that room, Amina breathed, slow, steady, alive. In the weeks of recovery, something changed. The world slowed. Damien spent every morning brushing Amina's hair. Clara brought flowers, painted the room with colors, notes, and laughter. And one day, a nurse found the three of them watching the sunset from the hospital balcony. Amina sat between them, frail but glowing. "I think," she said, "we are exactly where we are supposed to be." And in that moment they were. Clara graduated top of her class. Her eyes still held the fire of the little girl who once waited at the hospital door. But now, she carried more than dreams. She carried her mother's resilience, her father's strength, and a heart full of stories. She chose pediatric surgery, not because it was easy, but because it was hard. Because that was what her parents had taught her. The hardest paths often lead to the most meaningful lives. Her first week as a medical resident, she stood in the very same hospital where her parents met. Her badge read, Dr. Clara Lancaster-Amon. Patients smiled at her, unaware that her name was already whispered with quiet respect in every hallway. One morning, Clara walked into the neonatal wing and froze. There, sitting by the incubator of a premature baby girl, was a young woman, tired, alone, her hands trembling. The baby's monitor beeped softly. The girl was crying, silently. Clara knelt beside her. "Do you want to hold her?" The girl looked up, eyes wide. "I am afraid," she said. "What if I hurt her?" Clara took her hand gently. "You are not alone. I will help you." As she guided the girl's arms, a flood of memory hit her. Her mother's voice. Her father's hands. The warmth of love in the middle of fear. That evening, she told Amina and Damien what had happened. They were sitting in the garden, wrapped in a shawl together, sipping mint tea. Amina smiled, her eyes shining with tears. "That girl will never forget what you gave her." Damien laughed softly. "She is turning into you." "No," Amina said, holding Clara's hand. "She is becoming something more. She is becoming all of us." Over the next few years, the three of them expanded the foundation. They built women's centers in 5 new countries, opened scholarships for girls who had no access to education, funded mobile clinics in war-torn regions. And wherever they went, Clara led with kindness. Not just with skill, but with the wisdom that only comes from witnessing real pain and real love. One day, during a conference in Nairobi, a woman approached her with a small, worn photo. It was a picture of Amina, years ago, holding a newborn baby. The woman pointed. "That baby was me. Your mother saved both our lives." Clara stood silent, heart swelling. She had known her mother was extraordinary. But in that moment she realized. Her mother had become hope for thousands. When she returned home, Clara sat beside Amina in the study. Amina had grown slower, more tired in recent months. The treatments had extended her life, but her heart carried years of service. Clara placed the photo in her lap. Amina touched it gently. "I remember her," she whispered. "Her mother was so scared. And so brave." Clara nodded. "You changed her life. You changed mine. And now, I want to carry it all forward." Tears welled in Amina's eyes. But she smiled. "That is all I ever hoped for." That night, Clara found Damien on the porch, staring up at the stars. He was quiet, thoughtful. "She is slowing down," he said. His voice cracked. "I do not know how to be without her." Clara wrapped an arm around him. "She is not going anywhere, Dad. Not really. She is in every life she touched. And she touched more than we will ever count." The sky above was endless, full of soft light. And in that stillness, the story of their love, born in chaos, forged in service, continued to echo. In children's laughter. In healed wounds. In hands held across oceans. Because when love is real, when it is built not on perfection, but on patience, understanding, and purpose, it does not end. It only grows. Years later, Clara stood at the front of a vast auditorium. Her white coat now bore a golden pin, awarded for global humanitarian medical service. Behind her, a large screen displayed photos of her childhood, her parents, and the countless lives they had touched together. She took a deep breath, surveying the sea of young faces before her. Future doctors, nurses, midwives, Dreamers. My name is Dr. Clara Lancaster-Amon, she began, voice steady but full of emotion. And everything I am today began with two people who refused to give up on each other, or on the world. She told them of her mother's hands, gentle, tireless, scarred with sacrifice. Of her father's heart, fierce, soft, broken, and healed again. She spoke of nights filled with fear, of laughter that lit up the darkest hospital corridors. And of how love, when lived with purpose, can become medicine itself. There was silence when she finished. Then a slow standing ovation. That evening, she visited the family home. It had aged like everything does. But the warmth remained. Books still lined the walls. Photos of Clara's childhood, her parents' early clinic days, their travels. Amina now used a cane. Her hair silver. Her steps measured. But her smile, still the same. Still bright enough to melt winter snow. Damien sat beside her, his arm around her shoulder. Time had softened his sharpness, but his eyes still lit up every time he saw her. Clara sat on the floor between them, like she had as a child. I want to open a new center, she said. In Syria. The children there, they need someone to fight for them. Amina closed her eyes. She had seen too many wars. Too many broken bodies. Too many mothers whose arms were left empty. But then she opened them again. And in Clara's gaze, she saw not sorrow, but strength, compassion, resolve. Then go, she said softly. And when you go, carry us with you. Damien reached into the drawer beside his chair. He pulled out a small leather notebook. Amina's first journal. The one she kept through medical school. He placed it in Clara's hands. It belongs to you now, he said. Write the next chapter. Months passed. Clara stood in a dusty village in northern Syria. Bombed buildings surrounded the pop-up clinic. But inside, there were fresh white sheets. Sterile tools. Hope. She bent beside a little boy with a fractured arm. His mother watched nervously. Clara looked into her eyes. I am here, she said gently. You are not alone. Those words had lived in her heart since the day her mother whispered them into a delivery room years ago. And now they became her own legacy. The center grew. More children arrived. And with them, more mothers, grandmothers, sisters. Women who had never known kindness from a stranger. Now, they were met with gentle hands and patient ears. Clara wrote letters to Amina and Damien every week. She told them of the newborn twins delivered under candlelight. Of the blind girl who learned to read by touch and began teaching others. Of the teenager who had lost his entire family, but now wanted to become a doctor. Every story was a thread. Each one woven into the great, living tapestry her parents had begun decades before. One evening, after a particularly long day, Clara sat on the clinic roof. The sun was setting behind broken walls. But the sky still glowed with gold. She opened her mother's journal. On the first page, in fading ink, were the words, May every life I touch remember not my hands, but my heart. Clara smiled. And she began to write. My name is Clara. I come from love. I walk in its footsteps. I build in its name. And far away, back in the old house on the hill, Amina sat quietly, her hand resting over her heart. As if she could feel the words forming across oceans. As if every heartbeat she had given to the world had found its way back. She looked at Damien. You feel it too, don't you? He nodded. Eyes closed. I do. Their story, built on grief, rebuilt through grace, had never ended. It had simply passed on. Like breath, like light, like love. Winter came softly to the old house on the hill. Snow dusted the trees. The wind whispered through the window panes. Inside, Amina sat in her favorite chair, wrapped in a quilt Clara had sent from Syria. Its fabric was woven by the hands of women she had trained, hands once trembling from war, now steady with purpose. Her breathing was slower these days. More measured. Her body tired, but her spirit strong. Damien tended to her every day. He brought her tea. Read her favorite poetry. Listened to the radio beside her, just as they had in the early days when silence used to feel like peace. Clara came home that December. She entered the house quietly, not wanting to startle them. But Amina turned her head before a word was spoken. "I felt you," she said with a warm smile. Clara dropped to her knees and laid her head in her mother's lap. She did not speak. She just breathed, listened to her mother's heartbeat, and knew time was short. That night, the three of them sat by the fireplace. The lights on the mantel twinkled softly. Clara pulled out the journal again. "I have been writing," she whispered. "There are so many stories now, Mama. So many children whose lives are becoming something beautiful." Amina looked into the fire. "Promise me something," she said. "When I am gone, do not stop. No matter how much it hurts. Let the work become your healing." Clara nodded through tears. "I promise." Damien stood, placed a hand on Clara's shoulder. Then he knelt in front of Amina, taking her hand. "I am still so in love with you," he whispered. "And I always will be." Amina smiled, her eyes wet. "I know. I never doubted it." That night, the stars shone brightly. And sometime just before dawn, as snow gently fell outside the window, Amina Ramon Lancaster took her final breath. Peacefully, wrapped in the arms of the man who loved her, with her daughter's hand in hers. No machines, no alarms, just silence and love. The funeral was held in the very hospital she had helped build. Doctors came from all over the world. Children she had once delivered now stood grown, many with children of their own. They brought flowers, stories, songs in her honor. Clara spoke last, her voice steady, though her hands trembled. She gave everything to others, not out of duty, but out of love. She believed in people even when they did not believe in themselves. And she taught me that healing is not just a science, it is an act of courage. She paused, held up the old journal. "I will continue this. I will carry her forward in every life I touch." Damien placed a hand on her back as they walked out into the soft, gray afternoon. "I see her in you," he whispered. "Every day." Months passed, then years, and Clara continued the legacy. She married a fellow doctor, a man who, like her father, saw strength in softness and knew the value of staying when things grew hard. Together, they adopted 3 children from war zones where Clara once served. In the evenings, she would sit them on her lap and read from Amina's journal. They knew every line by heart, because even though they had never met her, they were being raised in her love. One day, Clara returned to the old house on the hill. She walked the same path she once ran as a girl. Damien, now older, slower, sat by the window watching the garden. She embraced him, and they sat together quietly. He reached into a drawer and pulled out an envelope. "It is time," he said, and handed her the deed. The house would become a sanctuary, a place of rest for exhausted doctors, grieving parents, recovering nurses. It would be called Amina's Light, and in every room, there would be a small plaque with her words. "May every life I touch remember not my hands, but my heart." The house filled again, with footsteps, laughter, prayers, and song. And Clara stood on its porch every morning, just like her mother once did, watching the sun rise with quiet strength. Because some stories never end. They bloom, in every life touched, in every heart healed, and in every act of kindness passed forward, like a torch, from one generation to the next. Years passed like pages in a well-read book. Clara's children grew, strong, kind, curious. Each of them carried a piece of the story, a piece of the love that had built everything around them. The eldest, Amal, became a surgeon, not for the title, not for the glory, but because she had seen what a single act of compassion could do to a shattered life. The youngest, Yusuf, painted murals on the clinic walls, scenes of mothers and fathers holding children, of doctors with warm eyes, of homes rebuilt not with bricks, but with hope. One bright morning, Clara stood in front of a gathering of students at Amina's Light. Doctors, nurses, volunteers from all over the world had come to learn, to rest, to renew their sense of purpose. She smiled, holding her mother's journal in her hands. "This is not just a story of a doctor and a billionaire," she said. "This is the story of two hearts who refused to turn away from suffering." She paused, then looked around the room, eyes shining. It is a reminder that love is not always perfect. Sometimes it is messy, painful, demanding. But real love, love that is selfless and brave, can heal wounds no medicine can touch. She closed the journal. And the legacy we leave behind is not found in wealth, or status, or power. It is in the lives we touch, in the children we comfort, in the kindness we choose, even when it is hard. The room was silent. But in that silence lived every heartbeat of the story. Every cry, every laugh, every whispered promise. The moral of the story: true love is not just a feeling, it is a daily choice. To care, to stay, to give, and to grow through hardship, not in spite of it. It teaches us that we do not have to change the whole world overnight. But we can change someone's world. With compassion, with understanding, with courage. Even in the darkest times, there are people who carry light in their hearts. And if we choose to become one of them, then the legacy of love lives on. Through us. Forever.